Hello again. Welcome to Career Expert Roundtable. I am Bill, and as always, I have with me Abby from the Life Work Balance YouTube channel. And we are here to answer your questions, anything to do with how to get hired. The title of this is called How to Get Hired in 2025. So if you are between jobs, uh, get in the chat and ask us some questions. How are you doing today, Abby?
I am doing well. And, one of the things that just came to mind to me that is kind of along this topic that you and I have somewhat danced around when it comes to, sharing with people is
Yep.
the personableness and how that factor plays into your success during the interview process and the
Oh,
job search
definitely.
process.
Yeah.
And that can sometimes be really stressful because, we interviews are not like any other situation in the real world. So it's such
Yeah.
a fabricated situation, but you still have to show up with enthusiasm and excitement and things like that. So I think maybe that could be a good starting place for us. I'm
Oh, yeah,
streaming,
definitely.
I'm streaming on my YouTube channel. I'm also streaming on my Twitch channel. So if anyone has questions or comments, put them in the chat. Bill and I can see all of them coming through. Bill's done a great job of putting questions on the screen so you can see what those questions are that are coming through. But I think we can start off on this. If
Yeah,
you're
definitely. And you're absolutely right. So we are going live on my YouTube channel, The Company's Expert. We're also going live on your YouTube channel, Life Work Balance, and your Twitch channel, as I
yeah,
understand. So wherever you're watching this, get in the chat, ask us questions. The whole point of this is for us to answer your questions, help you out, whatever you may be struggling with, wondering about, or you just want to talk about. It's all good. That's what we're here to do. And you're absolutely right, Abby. That's like job interviews are pretty much the most artificial exchange I think ever, pretty much.
yes,
Certainly in the business world, it's fake as all hell. There's
yes.
nothing about it. Everything is crafted. Everything is rehearsed. You know,
And you
it is
can't predict anything unless they tell you exactly what questions are going to be asked. So not only is it super artificial and fake, but then you have to try to guess what you're going to be talking about and how to answer questions. So it is the perfect scenario for high levels of stress and high level of anxiety, which is not the perfect scenario for you to perform at your best. So
absolutely, and
setup.
this is like your area too with the psychology. I mean, that's a whole other thing because you know if you are between jobs, chances are you're not feeling a lot of self confidence. You might be feeling stressed. I mean that's extremely common. But yet, when you go to an interview, whether it's virtual or face to face, it's like you're trying to put on this facade of being comfortable and confident, and you're taking everything in your stride, like very very artificial kind of situation, which from every angle.
Yeah, and best case scenario, you are comfortable in your current job and you are just lackadaisically job searching and you just happen to come upon an opportunity that's a good next step for you. So you do have some baseline of comfort and confidence. But that's not the case for the majority of people who are in the process of job searching. They're most likely trying to get away from a toxic work environment, a boss that they hate, coworkers
Oh
that they
yeah.
don't like, a job that is just draining. There's all these other things that are going on. Maybe they're currently unemployed and they have a very high level of stress because they have to survive. They have to get income so that they can
Absolutely, yeah.
meet their
If
basic
you're in
needs.
that situation, you are definitely not alone.
Yeah.
If you are running away from a bad boss or a toxic situation, or just the financial side of things is just, I mean, you are not alone. That's a very common thing.
Mhm.
Um, we got some questions here. Let's just jump into some of this
Let's
stuff
do it.
here. Dark Warrior says, "What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?" I don't
Ooh.
know.
Yeah.
That's
Well, when it comes to job searching, honestly, the best piece of advice is to start when you're comfortable. And that is hardly ever like taken into account because when you're comfortable, you don't necessarily want to leave what's comfortable. But one of the things to remember is that when you are working for an organization, that organization is most likely concerned with that organization and not with you as an individual. And so you need to be responsible for you. And while you might, not job search once you've gotten the job and you're 3 weeks or months into it, you want to keep your options open all of the time so that you can be ready for anything, whether that is the next best step for you or if something happens in the organization and you need to leave as soon as possible.
yeah. I meant what I said. I don't remember what advice I got that was good or whatever. I mean, the thing is, you learn by doing, right? Like that's what I recommend to everybody. You can listen to advice, you can get ideas, and there's definitely a place for that. And we're here right now to help you with that.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, you need to go out and do things, and that's how you learn. Like, I don't know, you might know the technical terminology, Abby, about how, like, the different types of learning or whatever, but
Mhm.
it's like, that's where the real learning is. Nobody can tell you something can't be done, like if you've actually done it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not about opinions. It's about like what you've had proved to you. You know what I mean? If you've attempted something and it didn't work, maybe that might have worked for somebody else, but it didn't work for you. Maybe that's a permanent thing. Maybe it's a temporary thing. Who knows? All you can say is that I tried doing what I heard you're supposed to do and it didn't really work for me.
Yeah.
So you try something else and maybe that does, right?
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Well, and I think kind of along those same lines, like just trying things is also good advice. If you are just going to stay status quo, you're not going to move out of your comfort zone, you're going to just do what you're comfortable with, then you're not going to learn, you're not going to grow, you're not going to get challenged. And that gets old eventually, and you might be replaced. So try new things, even if it's something that you're uncertain about. Apply for the job that you're not 100% qualified for. Talk to the person who could connect you to something. Like, there's no harm in trying something and maybe not getting something from it, but you won't know if you don't try.
Yeah, I'd love to keep going down that topic, talking about that's how you break down barriers and things. You like push up against them and things. Anyway, John Kench says, is showing up in person and handing in your resume a good idea? I heard lots of backlash from the internet on this. What are your opinions? Now, before we get into this, I just want to say this is exactly what we were just talking about. Yes. Some people say you should, some people say you shouldn't. How do you know what it is? Now, if you just listen to advice, you're not going to be able to figure it out.
Because it's going to be all over the place.
Yeah, exactly. So, the other element is that maybe it does work for some people and maybe it doesn't work for other people. Which one is it for you? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So, once again, try it, right? Now, what I would say is that, yes, it definitely does work. But like anything else, will it always work in every situation exactly the same way? No, right? So everything does work sometimes. This tends to work more than sometimes, in my opinion. And I've done this kind of thing before, way back in the day. I'd recommend that you try it. If you do it right, it can really work properly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think when it comes to handing in your resume in person, it depends on the organization. So if I were to show up to an organization and just like hand it to a front desk person, there's no guarantee that that front desk person is going to hand it to the person it can, like, something can happen with it for. So what I would recommend doing is do some research, understand, if you want to apply to a very specific job, you can try to figure out who the hiring manager is or who the recruiter is, or if you're going to go into the HR office, you can, have some of those keywords, prepared so that you can bring them up and say, like, hey, I wanted to apply for this job. I'm hoping that you might be able to pass my resume on to the recruiter for this position or the hiring manager for this position. So showing up and just distributing resumes randomly is not going to work. So you have to put some intentionality and focus behind who you're intentionally delivering your resume to. Ideally, you get someone's specific name from LinkedIn or from their company website or the job posting itself, and you can like go to the front desk person and say, can you please deliver this to John Doe? And they will then be able to follow through with that.
Okay, like I believe I've covered this on this stream before, but this is what I would do. Okay, like if we're talking about showing up in person, this is how I would do it. Okay, so what you do is you march right through the front doors of the organization, okay? And you're going to get to some form of reception desk, okay? And usually there's going to be some kind of receptionist at manning the front desk, right? So you go up to that person. Now, it helps if you know, like Abby said, if you know the name of the hiring manager, like who specifically you want to talk to. It helps, okay? But it's not absolutely essential. Let's say I didn't know this. I didn't know the name of the person that would be hiring for whatever position that I was a contender for. So I show up at the front desk. I say, hello, yes, could I speak to the hiring manager or the head of this particular department, head of the customer service department or head of, safety department or, whatever it is, right? Now, 90% chance they're going to say, no, I'm sorry, they're not available. Okay. Whether that's true or not, that's probably what they're going to say. So you
Mhm.
say, no problem. Listen, okay. Now you've brought along with you an envelope with your resume in it. Okay. So you produce that. You say, like, listen, okay, not a problem. If I leave this with you, can you see that that individual gets it? Is that okay? Right now, 90% chance they're going to say, sure, like I'll deliver that to them or I'll put it in their pigeonhole or, their mail slot or whatever. Right. Um, what would be good then is to ask them, what is the name of that individual? Can I ask? Right. And if they tell you the name, great. They may not always tell you the name, but, okay, fine. But it would be really nice if you could get that information from them. Okay. Usually they will because you're like leaving something for the person. It's a reasonable request. Okay. So let's say they tell you their name. They're John Doe. Okay. You say, okay, no problem. If you could see that they get that, that would be great. Thank you very much. And that's the end of your interaction with the actual person at the front desk. You're not pushing for more. You're not trying to push your way in and force yourself on people. Okay, you're acting very professionally, very personably. Okay, and then the idea is that you're going to go away now, and now you're going to follow up. You have a reason to follow up. So what would be perfect is if you could leave a voicemail or place a call to the name of the person that's the hiring manager you're trying to reach. Okay, so John Doe. So you call the main switchboard, you get patched through the John Doe. You could do this after hours and leave a message, or you could talk to them in person, like in real time, and you say, "Listen, yeah, hello, my name is X Bill. And I'm just following up. I had left you an envelope at the front desk, and I was just following up to see if you'd received it yet." Okay. Now, whether they have or they haven't, it's immaterial at this point. Okay. If they say, no, I haven't received it, that's fine. Or they say, yeah, I got this envelope. Were you the guy that sent me the resume or whatever? Doesn't matter. You say, this is where you make your pitch. You say, listen, I just wanted you to know that, I do this. This is the problem I solve. And if ever you're looking for someone who can do that for you guys, I would love to work for you. I live in the area. I know you guys do great work in this area. And if ever you're looking, I would love to join your team. That's all. Have yourself a great day. That kind of thing, right? Now, if they are hiring, then it might go further, okay, because you might be appropriate for a job. If they're not hiring right now, oh well, maybe they're hiring in a month, something like that, in which case they keep your name in mind, etc. Okay. But the thing is, you've just distinguished yourself by applying in person. They've met you. They've seen how professional you are. They've seen evidence of how passionate you are about working there because you showed up in person. They could, even if they wanted to, go and talk to the receptionist and say, like, I understand you spoke to this person. What were they like? Were they professional? Were they personable? That kind of thing, right? So it opens up a lot of doors. It distinguishes yourself and it elevates yourself above the crowd. So that's how I would do it if I was going to do this kind of thing. Okay. If you're
And
going
I
to,
would say that there's no harm in trying it. I've worked for an organization as a recruiter where our policy was we don't do paper applications. So we're not going to accept people's resumes because it was also a public institution. So we had a document retention period. So if we took a document, we needed to keep it for a certain period of time. So we just didn't accept resumes. So if you were in that sort of situation where you showed up to try to give your resume to someone and they say, I'm sorry, I can't accept this, then it's okay to say, okay, that I totally understand. Kind of then going to what Bill was saying, can I get so-and-so's name? And I will try to email them a copy or, something like that so that there's no door slam in your face and you're not necessarily taking no as an answer. You're just putting in a little bit more extra effort to identify who you might be able to get your document to.
yeah. And I want to clarify, in my version of this, you're going to the hiring manager. You're not going to a recruiter. You're not going to anyone in the HR department. You're going to a manager of a department, the head of whatever department. And someone like that, at least in my experience, saying, oh, I refuse to accept something on paper or something,
Yeah.
that's a little more rare.
Yeah.
They won't have standard HR policies that they're following because they're not in the HR department. This is just somebody saying, listen, I'd love to work for you if ever you're hiring people like me. That's all. Just no pressure. A lot of people will, if you present it like that, in my experience, a lot of people will be like, okay, thanks for letting me know. It's great to see people that are interested. and I'll keep this on file, kind of thing.
Yep.
Right. So,
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing to keep in mind when it comes to bringing your resume in person, that's not necessarily from a job search perspective, but from an interviewing perspective. I highly recommend that you bring printed copies of your resume to an in person job interview so you can hand them out to the people who may be present in the interview just in case they haven't reviewed it. Then they can review it in the moment during the interview and maybe ask you some specific questions about your experience. That's not exactly what this question was getting at, but if you bring copies of your resume that you use to apply for this position that you're interviewing for, it just shows that you're enthusiastic, you're prepared, you're providing them with additional information that they may not have already had. So regardless of what situation you're talking about, it doesn't hurt.
what questions you want to take? Because while I was talking about that one, we got about 150 questions. So,
Yeah,
so
we got a lot of things coming through. So let's
yeah.
go
So
down to Behringer Feinar, I think.
I don't know. I don't even know what GitHub is, to be honest.
Yeah, so
Behringer
GitHub.
Feinar. Here you go.
Yep. So just as a thing, GitHub is like a storage location, and a lot of
Okay.
people who are in like IT might use a GitHub profile as like their portfolio.
Okay.
So yeah, I applied for a position recently. Generally, how long should it take before they get back to you? How long should I wait before giving up and moving on? What do you think, Bill?
I think it's completely irrelevant. You shouldn't be waiting for these people. You should apply and then automatically focus on the next opportunity. If these people get back to you, great. But you shouldn't be like waiting by the phone for them to call, like not doing anything. You should always be moving forward to pursue the next opportunity, apply for the next role, try and discover new opportunities out there.
Yep. And I think that if it's a job that you believe is a perfect fit for you, it is your dream job with your dream organization, and you have a connection somehow to like a recruiter or the hiring manager, whoever it might be, I would wait like a week and then follow up if you have their contact information. But in many cases, it is like it seems anonymous on the job posting, like who you could contact. And so if you're going to be applying to jobs online and you're just submitting application after application, you don't necessarily want to wait around for one to get back to you. You want to have many in the pipeline because something could happen with any of those at any point, positive or negative, during this process. So keep many eggs in the basket and be able to use whichever one is, accessible at the time.
Absolutely.
Don't
The overwhelming odds are is that these are not going to work out. Like if you have a 99% chance of nothing coming of any opportunity, you proceed accordingly. Like if you keep pursuing a lot of opportunities, statistically, you will get something. Something will come along. But do you apply and wait by the phone? No, you don't.
Yeah.
Which is the next one you figure? Okay, Behringer.
Sing.
S. Singh. I have a question about arbitration. I got hired for a nursing position with CVS, and they want me to sign this agreement, and I feel awkward signing it. I know it says voluntary, but it says I need to mail them a letter to opt out. I feel like I'm going to get targeted and fired before I even start. I've said that seems overly bureaucratic, but then again, I'm not in the nursing profession.
Yeah, me neither. And just 2 comments down, they also add that at the same time, it's my nursing license. I totally agree. I think that, it's, I don't know what the arbitration clause or statement says. It might be that you can't sue them or they're trying to protect you. The US is sue happy. So
Yeah.
looking for a lawsuit around any corner. So I would read it. And if you feel like you need it, maybe you can talk to someone in HR who can give you a little bit more information about why it's something that they're asking you to sign. But both Bill and I, we are not legal professionals who have any basis to tell you what you should or should not be doing when it comes to
if it feels weird, it's probably weird. You know what I'm saying? Like that's usually how these things go.
When it's kind of like a non-compete, it just seems, I don't know. It's weird when it's like your nursing license and your ability to practice nursing.
Yeah. If there's something real at stake there, you want to proceed very carefully. I mean, I know that's self-evident, but you're asking us like what we think about it. That's kind of the gut feeling is that you're already getting a weird vibe. I'm getting a weird vibe.
Yep.
If you just want to apply for a job, that's something relatively simple. Like why are they complicating with all this business. You know what I'm saying?
And if you've worked at other places before with your nursing license, did they require that you sign an arbitration document? If so, why? If not, why not? So it also may be worth it to consult with like an employment lawyer just to see. That's always an added cost, but it could be very well worth it to fully understand what this document is asking of you and why they might be asking you to sign this.
Is this the next one here? What's better, experience or a degree?
Yes.
Both, equally. The one isn't better than the other. They're both two different things.
Yeah.
And you really need both to be a master of anything. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think that when it comes to applying to jobs, many jobs will state that a degree of some sort is required. But in many cases, a degree is not necessary to be successful at the job. So I actually think that experience is much more valuable. It's not necessarily saying that a degree doesn't matter, but I might have all of the theoretical foundation, but have inflexibility in my thinking because I haven't been in the real world to see that gray area.
Yeah, well, there isn't a one size fits all answer. I mean, the
Right.
exact opposite of that is like the medical profession. If you want to be a doctor, you need a degree.
And if
Period.
you want to be a lawyer,
It's,
you have to have a degree.
illegal. Yeah.
Yeah. So there
Yeah.
are
So I mean, it
jobs,
does vary, right?
yes.
And
there are
if
certain
you're in
jobs
an
that
if you're in an industry where it isn't a profession, it isn't regulated, so it's not like anyone needs a license to do that work or anything. The only real, I mean, you tell me what you think, Abby. My sort of thing would be look at the person who's hiring. Are they someone who has a lot of education? In which case, they'd probably put a lot of weight on how much education you have. If there's someone that's, they don't have any education, they learn everything they know by being on the job, then they will judge you by the same standard, So, I mean,
yes. And this goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, which is that you can't expect how this is going to go at all. You could say, well, I don't need a degree to be successful in this role. But then you get faced with a hiring manager who has their PhD and believes that there is so much value to having that higher education that if you don't have at least a master's degree, then you're not moving forward. So you can't predict it.
Their entire sense of self-worth is tied up in the fact that PhD is something insanely valuable. You know what I'm saying? So they're going to judge you by that. And if you try and suggest that that's not how things work or anything like that, that's a threat. You're threatening their very sense of self-worth in that. So there's very high stakes. People tend to hire in their own image, So
and we like people who are like us.
Yes.
So it's just that is the bias that occurs in any setting. And it's also very prevalent in the hiring situation. And so if you have someone who's coming in who is very different from you and you're trying to hire to fill a position, that will challenge you to believe that they're going to be able to do the job well when you already have this kind of picture of who you want, which is probably similar to who you are in your mind.
Yeah, there is no answer to this. You're going to get either or. It's going to, in one situation, it'll be one extreme, and another situation will be another extreme, and you get a lot of things that are somewhere in the middle. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, and even though there's that like you can't figure out what it's going to be, my bias is that experience is usually more effective than a degree, but that's not going to prove itself to be true until you actually get hired into the position.
Yeah, and that's not universal either. I mean, nothing is universal is the point, for this.
Yeah. The next one I think is Rourke-Ponce.
Rourke-Ponce. Okay. Here we go.
Starting a job search and have not had an interview for a job in many years. Also not alone. That's usually how it goes for a lot of people. They get a job, they're in it for several years or many years, and then they're like not feeling ready. They're rusty for their job application process. So ideas like STAR or SOAR are totally new to me. It looks like I have so much to learn. Yes. And I would say that the process for interviewing, the goal is to make a connection with the interviewer. You're not going to schmooze them. You're not going to, try to like be super, super charismatic. But at the same time, you want to build and establish a relationship with the person that you're interviewing with. And so if you can't stick to a STAR or CAR response for every response to a question that's asked, if you can establish some rapport with the interviewer, it's not going to hurt you. There are some things that you definitely want to make sure that you do when it comes to preparing for upcoming interviews if it's been a while. And one of those things is practice interviewing, whether it's by yourself with a voice memo or recording yourself on Zoom so you can watch yourself back. whether it's going to a friend or a family member who can help you practice it, answering interview questions, or working with someone like me as an interview coach. Working and practicing on your interviewing style before you interview is going to be key to helping you feel more comfortable and confident during the process. If you have been not interviewing for years and you just go into an interview, it's going to be very clear because you're going to be rusty. You might not be able to answer their questions in a succinct, clear way. You're going to look unprepared. So practice for sure before your first interview.
You do have a lot to learn, Rourke, if that's how you say that. Sorry, if that's not how you say it. There's a lot to learn, but the good news is it's really not rocket science.
No.
Now, what I would say is that, like, if you're like a total novice, you're coming into this, you don't know anything, you don't know how anything works. I would say you could learn pretty much everything you need to know in like 2 weeks if you're working on it every day. Okay, if you're really going hard, you're spending hours watching YouTube videos, reading articles, going on ChatGPT, whatever you do to learn. That's the level that we're talking about. Okay, so it's not like this totally prohibitive thing. You're going to be fine, but you really need to take advantage of resources. There's so many unintuitive and, quite frankly, stupid things about how this works. And there's a lot of things that no one tells you the reality. It's not out on public display of this is exactly how it works. Here's the roadmap. It's not like that. A lot of things are kind of hidden. For example, the thing that I always tell people, and that people especially younger people, they're just amazed, or they don't believe me, they feel that surely this can't be true, is that the vast majority of jobs are not posted. Only about 20% of jobs are posted. So when you look at all the jobs you can see online, you're looking at 20% of what's actually out there. The others, you can put yourself forward for those, but it's a completely different method to doing it, with different rules and things like this. So there's a lot to learn, but it's really not rocket science. We were talking about degrees a moment ago. If you have a degree in something, this is child's play compared to that, but you do have to put a little bit of time in, you know what I'm saying?
Yep. And when you are searching for a job, once you've been in a job for a while, sometimes it can be easy to move up within your organization because you're just like the obvious next person to fill the next role. You might also have a network where people just refer you to a position. You don't even have to go through the formal recruitment process, but having to go through the formal job application, job search, and recruitment process is very different from what it was even 10 years ago, just because of how technology is changing things. So do some research on some of those updates. AI is a huge area that has influenced how people are applying to jobs, how they're updating their documents. It's also influencing how employers are going through the job search process too. So there are some, I think, cultural changes that are happening that you will want to familiarize yourself with.
To start out, go to Abby's channel, watch some of her most popular videos. That will get you started. You could do the same thing for my channel if you wish. That'll get you started with some of at least some of the stuff to do with getting posted jobs.
Mm-hmm.
The hidden jobs, you go about it completely differently. You're dealing with different people in a different way with different goals. It's completely different. So there's like two worlds. And the way it usually works, at least in my experience, is that people, when they're starting out, young people coming right out of school, or people sort of towards the lower level, the worker level, you're kind of in one world where you're doing posted jobs and you're going to job interviews, you're dealing with recruiters. And then people that are further along in their careers, or they're at a higher level, maybe they're in like management, middle management and up, they're dealing with a whole other world. It's the world of networking, the world of referrals, that kind of stuff, where jobs aren't posted, this sort of thing. So two completely different worlds. And I've found that a lot of times they don't teach you about that whole second world when you're in like high school and stuff. They don't give you any inkling. That's how the vast majority of people like get hired and they get jobs. And they don't prepare you for that. And a lot of people never really step into that world, but that's where 80% of the job opportunities are, So a lot of people look at what they can see. They look at the posted job market. They get very depressed because they see not a ton of opportunities, and they see a ton of competition for those opportunities there are, you
And
know?
it's saturated. That's
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. But it seems like very depressing and stuff, and it is. But what you're not seeing is that that's only a partial view of what's actually going on. Once you see the whole thing, then it's a lot more hopeful, a lot more optimistic. You know what I mean? You
Mhm.
realize there's things that you can get, and things that are better than what you're seeing, and you have a real chance. You're not going in the front door with 700 other applicants, all trying to compete for one job. It's so anyway, I'm not. I'll just stop myself from not going down this rabbit hole. But learn all you can about that. Okay, there's a couple of different worlds here. There's the posted job market. There's a hidden job market. Don't shy away from the hidden job market, thinking it's some kind of conspiracy, which it isn't. You can get ample evidence of that doing your
And
own
many
research.
people believe it's a conspiracy and that you're never going to find a job from it until they do.
Yeah,
So,
many young people and
yeah.
many people that are not part of it. Yeah, until it happens.
Yeah. All
Like
right. The
what?
next comment that comes through for us to kind of chat about is from Ashlyn. And she says,
Okay.
what is a tactful way to say I need to limit phone time in a job? And so this is like almost to the bottom, but a couple from the top or from there.
Okay.
I have a health condition that causes me to need frequent breaks, which can be disruptive for phone calls. I
Where
must,
is? Sorry, what's the person?
Ashlyn.
Ash Lynn.
So
Is it
right
this
above
one
where,
right here?
yes, that's it. Yep.
Okay.
And so they much prefer doc prep and review. So I think there's a couple things when it comes to this. The first is if you're applying to a job that requires a high level of phone conversations and phone interaction, that might not be the best fit for you. However, if it's more of an administrative job where there might be phone calls and there might also be the doc prep and things like that, then it's totally a good fit for you. Um, because it's a health condition, if you're in the United States, you can probably get accommodations as long as you provide the correct, paperwork and stuff to your employer. So, if you can only have 2 hours of phone calls a day, then, you discuss that with your doctor, go to your HR people, and they will help you put that accommodation into your file so that if it gets to that limit, you have that accommodation in place to protect you and you cannot be fired or terminated because of that. Now, that caveat is if you applied for a job that does require high levels of that, working in a call center where it's your job to answer phones and have phone conversations all the time, then that might be grounds for them to decide that you are not suitable for the position because of the need for some of these accommodations, which means they might not move forward with hiring you or retaining you. So if you know that you have this type of condition that has these types of limitations, make sure that you're focusing on applying to jobs that aren't focused on interfering with that condition. But accommodations and going through that process is nothing new to HR departments. Shouldn't be anything new to your supervisor if they're new or a seasoned supervisor. They all go through training when it comes to the Americans with Disabilities Act and all of that. So definitely get accommodations to support your condition.
Okay. Which one next? The Bogdan thing? Is that
I believe
we're
so.
going to go to next? I live in Denmark. I'm here at the job center courses. They are advising that we should call before making the application. My question is, if after an interview, is it okay to write an email while waiting? Yes. Yeah, you can write an email to people. You don't need anyone's permission to do that. Is it effective? Depends who it's to. Uh, Abby could maybe speak to if it's more effective for recruiters to do
Yeah,
that.
it really depends. So I recommend that you send a follow-up email after every interview. I recommend that you send it to each person that you could get an email address for. So ideally, when you go to an interview or when you have an interview virtually, you somehow get their contact information of the people who were in the room and also the recruiter. You want to leave them with a really positive impression. And you can do that by writing a very nice thank you follow-up email. You can also use that email as an opportunity to ask any additional questions. And then again, express your enthusiasm for the position. You don't want to overwhelm them with a lot of emails. I recommend that you send your first email within the first 24 hours after your interview ends, ideally within a couple of hours after it's concluded. And then you want to wait. I recommend asking at the end of the interview when you can expect to hear from them. And then you don't have to be wondering what the next steps are. You know, they might say, well, we have interviews to the end of the week, so you can expect to hear from us by Tuesday next week. Then if you don't hear from them by Tuesday of next week, you can send an additional follow-up email saying, hi, just wanted to follow up. You said I would hear from you by Tuesday. I didn't see anything come through my inbox, so I just wanted to check in. You don't want to overwhelm them. And as we mentioned before in this stream, you don't want to wait around for a job. So even though you had an interview with an organization and you feel like it went really well and it's your dream interview, you want to make sure that you still have other things in your pipeline. You want to ensure that you have jobs that you're continuing to apply for, hopefully interviews that you're continuing to line up. Because even though this one feels like the dream job or like the interview went fantastic and this is the job you want, anything can happen and it cannot work out. So have other things waiting in the wings, coming through your pipeline, ready to go.
Yeah, I would say that, you know how, like, you know, it's basic manners that when someone offers you something, here, would you like a drink? You know, here, would you want this? You know, here, would you like a donut? You know, that kind of stuff. The automatic thing is you say, oh, thank you, right? Like, it's just an automatic kind of gesture of manners and etiquette, right? When you go to an interview, just as an automatic thing, you send a thank you note to every individual that was in those interviews, right? So if you went to one interview, there were like two people interviewing you, you would send two emails, one to each one, saying thank you very much. It was a pleasure meeting you. You know, I look forward to, you know, any kind of encounter in the future. Best regards. You know, something like that. It's just an automatic thing whenever you do an interview, right? You don't worry about it too much. Like Abby says, you don't overwhelm them with a ton of content. You just say, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I had a great time meeting you and I look forward to seeing you again. You know, just something, it's more of a protocol thing, right? Mm-hmm. And that should be automatic. That should be like your default thing that you do. Okay. In my opinion, that's how you regard it. Just like you would automatically say thank you to someone who offered you something. It's just etiquette.
Yep, and I am getting my link to my playlist right now. I'm putting it in the chat. So hopefully you see this come across, but this is my playlist on writing thank yous and following up after interviews. And I highly recommend you send a thank you note to every person who was involved in that interview, if you have the ability to contact them.
Hello to Sous-Marin Nucléaire from Switzerland. You see, I was an idiot. I thought that the Swiss had their own language, like you speak Swiss. I understand that that's not the case. There's like is it the French Swiss and the German Swiss, and are there Belgian Swiss? I'm not sure, but as I understand it, the French Swiss are like the smallest group, if I'm not mistaken. So Sous-Marin Nucléaire, I'm assuming you're French, the French Swiss. You could tell me if I'm totally off base on this. Ash is here. Ash says, when I was in the interview process, the managers have been very open about how long the positions have been posted. About 9 months. Okay, ooh, that's got a nice long time. The pay range was very wide, about 57,000 in between the low and the high. That's a nice big range too. That really seems like a default thing they got posted.
Yes, and that's probably the salary range, like the lowest someone could get paid and the highest someone could get paid, but not actually the hiring range. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so the next comment says, apparently they tell me they just don't give candidates money on the higher end. And they have that to account for yearly review and whatnot. I didn't like this, especially since the responsibilities are of a senior executive.
Yeah. That's what they say they do. Doesn't necessarily mean it's true.
So this is the responsibilities of a senior executive, but without the title. Tried to negotiate, but I fear I wasn't great with the timing of the back and forth with the recruiter. I was unemployed for several months and was scared they'd rescind the offer. I already started this job and found out that there were no other candidates for the position. Have I made a mistake and should I have been more firm with what I'd accept with the higher end of the pay?
You got sucked into the pay discussion.
Yeah. And this is tricky because organizations will appeal to candidates by putting the full salary range, like for the position, when
the alleged full salary range for the position.
When the actual hiring range is much less. And then when they're kind of cagey about it, you're a little bit suspicious. You are in this position currently. So, you know, you have a choice here. You can continue to work in this position and you can try to have conversations with your manager and your supervisor about how you can get up to a higher level of pay based off of your responsibilities and the things that you're doing, and kind of proving the concept that you are worth this extra pay. You can also start searching for a new job. So it's up to you with how you want to move forward in this. I've worked with I've worked in public organizations that have very limited budgets. So you kind of go in knowing that the pay might be lower than what you would like to make. And they don't really do increases in pay unless you get an official promotion. And then they kind of do across the board, small percent increases to salary. And if you're not okay with that, and that's going to affect your balance and the things you
If
got.
you're not okay with that, there's the door.
Yeah, it's time for you to start thinking about what to do next. The chances of them being open to negotiating now that you're currently in the position is much lower. And I don't necessarily think you made a mistake, especially if it's something that will help grow your experience and your resume and keeps you employed while you are job searching elsewhere. But at the same time, just based off of how I interpreted your tone of your comments, it doesn't sound like you're happy with this, and that there is probably something that's a better fit out there for you. So start looking is my advice.
So who here has ever bought anything online, like an auction type situation, like eBay or Kijiji or any of those things? How you like
Prime Day here in the United States, it ended on it was 8 to the 11th, and it makes you feel like you have this urgency to buy something at a lower rate when really it's just is falsified numbers that make you
feel it's like so if the price isn't fixed, you could even if the price is fixed, you can shop around. You can aggressively say nope. I mean, yes, I could buy it here, but I want to really see if you could get this somewhere else. Maybe you could get it used somewhere else, that kind of thing. Or you could just go flat out. You could go to auction sites where the price is variable. It fluctuates. You put in a bid here, you put in a bid there, right?
eBay. Yep.
This is how employers are when they're hiring. You're the object that they want to buy, right? You see how kind of aggressive you are? No, I don't want to pay that. I want to get something cheaper. I want to get the same thing for cheaper, right? And I'm going to do all these different things. I'm going to look in all these different places. I'm going to go to great lengths to see if I can get this for cheaper, right? That's what they're doing, okay? They don't just pay out money, generally speaking. They don't just pay, here you go, out of a sense of fair play. Well, you're a, upstanding, decent person. Here, you deserve this large amount of money. It's no, there's a market price for these things, and they really try and push to get that same thing, that same candidate, that capable employee for cheaper. Okay. Yeah. And to that end, they're going to employ all kinds of tactics. The sort of bare minimum is, even if they're not really shopping around and trying to push for different things, even if they're just sort of posting a job and then interviewing the candidates for it, the bare minimum they can do is play these kinds of games with you by saying oh, I don't know, we don't pay that much, whatever. Yeah, anybody could say that, even if it's a lie, right? Just to get you to lower your expectations, to agree to something less, right? Because you believe that, they won't pay me the amount of money I want. Let's see if I can get this lesser amount of money. And because if I can get it for that, it won't be great, but it would be doable. And then at least I have a job. If they can convince you of this, they're going to convince you of this. So you take the job for a lower amount of money than perhaps you would be expecting, or you could have gotten somewhere else, right? So you can expect this. They're going to play these types of games, right? It's a bit of
it's just like what the candidates do. We play these games too, because I might be willing to accept $50,000, but I'm saying I'm only willing to accept 80. We do it too, because it's the same thing. And that based off of the kind of series of comments that you left, this position has been open for 9 months. So they were kind of subtly telling you that they would continue the search if you weren't going to meet them where they were at. So when it comes to these sorts of salary conversations, it's important for you as the candidate to know what you need. What is your true minimum? And that's not just need to survive, but need to grow in your career, need to, have money, extra money to do fun things on the weekends, whatever that might look like for you. So what is the minimum? And if they're not willing to meet you there, you need to be willing to move on. And because it's probably going to be that type of relationship the entire time you're employed, where they're not really willing to make accommodations to meet you where you're at, you also need to ensure that you're being realistic about what you are worth getting paid. I might think that I should be getting paid $1 million a year, but I'm not worth that $1 million a year if I'm, currently making $50,000 a year. So I could say, you must pay me $1 million, and they will say no. So you have to find this middle ground of based off of my education, my experience, my skills, the things that I'm bringing to the table. I believe that I should, at minimum, get paid this much. You're not going to start there with the negotiations. You're going to start higher and ideally work your way still a little bit above what your minimum was, but never accept less than what that minimum is for you.
And unfortunately, candidates are at a disadvantage in this because the interviewers have a lot more experience. So they know that, candidates always say this, but then they always end up accepting this, like they are forearmed with that experience. They know that, okay, I have had candidates get up from the table and leave when I offer this. So that clearly shows that that's too little. I can't get the candidates I want if I'm offering this. But if I offer a little bit more, they hum and they haw and they say this and they say that, but in the end they accept it and then they stay in the role, So to me, that suggests, okay, that's a reasonable amount to offer. And why would I offer like $20,000 more when I know I can get most of them for this much money? You know what I'm saying? That's what's going on the other side of the table.
And in a lot of cases, they don't just have one candidate that they're working with. So like in Ash's case, they were the only person that was in this process. But in many cases, they'll have one more, maybe two more people. So like the top 3 candidates, they're going to make an offer to the first one. Ideally, it works out. But if that doesn't work, they move on to the next person and then they move on to the next person. So they are in a place of advantage because they might have multiple people who are willing to fill this role. And you can't know what that is. They're not going to tell you, well, we have 2 other people who we could give this position to. Because if they use that on you, you're going to say, okay, well, then go with those 2 other people. I'm going to keep searching if you're in a position for that. So
like the other kind of flips, maybe this is not the best vehicle, like place to get into this, but what's actually going on is you're talking about your worth, right? Mm-hmm. Now, okay, so you work for an organization. Okay, now they turn what you do into value. So if they hire you, and the revenue of the company goes up by $100,000 this year, okay, because they have your services on board, right? You could argue that you're worth $100,000 a year. You're bringing in, you're boosting their revenue by that much, okay? Now, that's not just a function of you, that's a function of them. So let's say you have a PhD, right? But they are hiring you to dig ditches, and you're not bringing in $100,000 a year. Their revenue is going up by like, I don't know, $20,000 because they have you, because you're digging ditches, right? Mm-hmm. And you're saying like, listen, I'm worth like, I don't know, whatever you are, $200,000 a year. I got a PhD, okay? Like I can bring in that kind of value, and the reality is that in this situation, you can't because they're not using you correctly, right? You're only bringing in $20,000 of value, not $200,000 of value, right? Because they're not using you properly. So they're not wrong when they're saying like, you're not worth that much to them, right? Because you're not being used correctly, right? So that's also a factor. It's not just like, oh, I believe I'm worth this much, and in absolute terms I am, therefore I should get paid this. It doesn't always, the employer doesn't always see it that way, because that sounds nice, but that's not the reality we're seeing. We're not seeing our bottom line go up by that much when we hire someone like you.
Yep.
So as far as we're concerned, we can't pay you that because you're just not worth that much to us. And maybe these people are idiots that don't know how to use you, but that's what they're seeing. Yep. So the reality is kind of a composite of like the two.
Yeah. So to just finish answering Ash's question, have I made a mistake and should I have been more firm with what I'd accept on the higher end of the pay? It's tricky because you were unemployed. So maybe you needed the job to, survive. And now that you have the job and you are doing the work, maybe you now have some flexibility to find a job that's going to be a better fit for you.
Yeah, beggars can't be choosers. You need options to get negotiating power. And if you have no other option than unemployment, you kind of have no other choice than to take what they offer you. Now, you can bluff, but any bluff you make, you have to be prepared that they're going to call your bluff, in which
And then you'll
case you
have to
still
move on.
lose. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so the secret to winning here, obviously, is to have more options. So keep applying, keep trying to look up options that you can go for. And then that gives you some power to be able to say to people, no, I can't accept any more than this
Yeah.
or any less than this.
Yeah. And we got about 10 more minutes. So I think we can
Okay.
make it through some of these questions that are coming through. So just another person said, do you believe it is okay to ask for the position in the interview? You
Sure.
can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
I personally wouldn't recommend doing it, but you can.
It depends how you do it. Like this is where Abby's knowledge of like psychology and stuff comes into place, because a lot of things like this, they really depend on how you do it. Not that any one thing is necessarily good and bad,
Yeah.
good or bad. You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
you have a real master conversationalist or interviewer, they could get away with this, and they could making like they could, that could be their trump card that gets them the job.
Yes.
But for a lot of average people, that might be tough to have this work out,
Yeah. And I would say most people won't be successful asking for the position in an interview. So unless you're a master conversationalist, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, it's very risky unless you really know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
The better thing is to try and be pleasant, very humble, and to make them feel really good about you, to give them warm fuzzies about you.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they feel good about you in the interview, the conclusion is that if they hire you and you're on the job, that's how you're going to be. They're going to get a good vibe working with you. It's not going to be awkward. It's not going to be stressful, and that's what you want them to think. So that's usually a better approach.
Yep.
Are we on this one?
Yes. In college, 15 plus years ago, I was in phone sales. I've been a care manager for a decade. Now I want to go into tech sales. Should I mention my sales as related experience on my resume? I think so.
Seems like it.
Yeah. In most cases, 15 years of experience is the maximum that you want to have on your resume. So if it was more than 15 years, then in that case, I say only include it if it is extremely relevant to the position. I bet you can also find sales related transferable skills from your care manager experience. So you can have at the very end of your resume, your tech or your phone sales experience, like as a small blurb to show that you've done it before. But there are things that have changed in the world of sales, when it comes to softwares that you use and even strategies that they use. So you'll want to make sure that you brush up on that. But I bet there are transferable skills that you'll be able to highlight more effectively from your most recent experience, rather than going all the way back and relying on that phone sales experience exclusively.
Yeah, I didn't come up through sales, but I know that there's sales and there's sales. Like there's different types of sales, right? For a start, you've got inside sales, outside sales. In different industries, they have different practices, different techniques. Some are more transparent, some are less transparent, some are like more hard sell, some are soft sell, so there's quite a bit of variance there. So you'd have to speak to what they're specifically looking for, I think, would be the key.
Yep.
Where are we? Are we on sous-marin nucléaire here?
Yeah. So they were following up, I think, on our conversation about thank you notes. So send the thank you note right after the interview. Yes, do that. You don't want to wait too long. And then they have another question that says, right now I'm applying for jobs, but cover letters are such a pain. Any tips? So I would have a templated cover letter that you then put into AI. Now, be aware that if you were to use a program like ChatGPT or Grok or any of those generative AI platforms, they might fill in your cover letter with information that is not accurate. So use it as a way to tailor your cover letter as a first draft. Do not use it as the final draft. Make edits, changes, tweaks so that it is accurate for you. Maybe change the tone of voice slightly so it matches you a little bit more. But generative AI is going to make the process of writing tailored cover letters so much easier. You can have it go longer, make it shorter, make it more conversational, make it more professional. Focus on this, focus on that. So use
write it in this style, write it in that style. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And I just actually helped a client with this morning. They needed to write in a specific type of style of writing. And so we had their cover letter and we asked the generative AI to let us know what needed to be changed to match this new style. And then said, don't change anything, just give us the tips on what needs to be changed and why. And that was very, very helpful. Now, you're not going to rely on that as the end all be all, but it's a really good starting place.
Absolutely. Those are great tools. Start using them in your job search. That's really what you need to do these days, is you need to incorporate those things.
Yeah. So I think we're now at the very bottom with Bogdan, I think.
Okay.
Don.
I see always is talking about, I just want to say for the salary negotiation, bottom line for salary negotiating, if you're just coming into this now, you can't negotiate until you're at the offer stage. So don't try to negotiate salary before they even give you an offer. The strategy, at least in my opinion, before you get to the offer stage, if you ever get there, is simply to avoid that discussion. How much money do you need? Oh, it's too soon to say. How much money do you need? We need to know. Well, this is an approved position that was posted, so therefore the salary range must have been approved. Can I ask what it is? And then whatever they say, sure, that's fine with me.
Yep, that's my tip. Is you don't necessarily deflect and avoid, but you turn the question back on them. Oh, well, thank you so much for bringing that up. What is the hiring range for this position? I like asking hiring range more than salary range, because salary range could be the entire posting, like, I guess, job description, like salary amount. So just like Ash had said earlier, it was a $57,000 discrepancy between the low end and the high end. That's probably salary range for the position. So you want to ask about the hiring range. It might be a little bit higher. It's probably at the lowest end to somewhere towards the middle. But if you can get an idea of what the hiring range is, then you might be able to pick a number that's a better fit for you.
Yeah. And if they absolutely push you and they say you must give us something, give a wide range, really low to really high, where both numbers are within reason, but just, you know what I'm saying? And then look, somewhere between here and here, that would probably be fine, And if they want to pin you down anymore than that, it's sorry, look, I don't know the benefits. I don't know the detail. I don't know anything at this point. So that's all I can give you. And if they don't accept that, then it's a red flag. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That's kind of my idea. Now, you can't do this. People, I always say this, and then people immediately say, well, you can't say that in a web form. It's no, you can only put a number in a web form. And in that case, I would put the lowest number you'd ever possibly accept, assuming that all the things that you don't know about the job, of which there are many, assume they're all best case scenario. They give you fantastic benefits. They give you 8 weeks vacation a year, blah, blah, blah. Assume they're all best case scenario and then put a number, the lowest you'd ever accept. It'll be a very small number and do it that way. And as you learn more about what some of these blanks actually are, you can always revise your requirements upwards as these are disclosed to you. Put it that way.
Well, and this might not be the best advice, but this is what I would do. I would write 0. I would put 0 as my number there, because if I have to put a digit into that blank, I will do that. But it seems completely unreasonable to expect anyone to be honest about where they're going to start. And so if you put 0, you're just, filling in the required form, knowing that that's going to be a conversation down the line. And if they're going to kick you out of the contention for this, or the consideration for this role, because you put 0 there, definitely not the right position. So I would put 0.
Okay. We've got always, thank you for answering questions. And excellent. Okay. And I believe this is pretty much, we're at our cutoff here for time.
Yep. And we've got just a couple little comments I'm going to read through on my own. When it comes to applying to jobs, Bogdan said, sometimes I fall for what's moral and good for society and tend to think about that. And we do that a lot with jobs. We start to feel loyalty to our jobs. We start to feel, we have to stick around for them, and we shouldn't negotiate because they've done a lot for us. In the employment world, you got to be out for yourself. That doesn't mean that you're going to step on people and create division and conflict in your best interests. But it does mean that the employer probably isn't looking out for you. So you need to look out for yourself.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We got some great questions. We are going to be back, I believe, 2 weeks from today. Is that the case, Abby? I think that's what.
Yep.
Yeah. So 2 weeks from today, same time, if you have any more questions. And yeah, best of luck to everybody. Just always remember, listen to advice. Like make use of resources, but there's no substitute for actually trying things yourself. That's the best teacher. Okay, so listen to, take advice, but then go out and try things.
Yeah.
And certainly in this game, like Abby kind of just mentioned, I think that's a great thing to mention because at the end of the day, whether we accept this or not, if you're a candidate for a job, you're in competition with all other candidates, and that has some interesting dynamics for it. People are reluctant to give you all the answers. Here, just do this, and that way you'll be able to put me out of a job. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the conflicts that are inherent with this. You also get a lot of people like, and you can tell me what you think of this, Abby. There's a lot of people out there that don't really know what they're talking about, but they're happy to give advice and position themselves as if they do know what they're talking about. And that's equally dangerous. You get people blindly following that and it doesn't go anywhere.
Yes.
So
Well, and I think this is, a very big blanket statement, but nobody knows what they're doing to begin with. So if
yeah.
you're going to start at a place where you don't know what you're doing, and it takes some trying, it takes some practice, it takes some testing of the waters, it might take some formal education, but you can get to a place where you will be competitive and the job search process will ideally work out for you.
And I'm taking a 2-week break from live streams. At least that's the intention. This is going to be my last live stream for a couple weeks. Somebody asked me a fantastic question. They said, Bill, how would you get a job? Like, forget about giving advice to younger people, or whatever. How would you get a job if you had to? So I think I'm going to do a video on that. I'm just going to do a very long video. I'm going to go through like 7 sort of methods of getting a job and like what I would do, not necessarily what someone starting out would do. And maybe that might give people ideas. I've never actually done a video like that on my channel in like 6 years or whatever that I've been doing this. So I might do that.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Like I'm not worried about like how realistic or how universal this applies to. If it gives people ideas, and opens up, things to investigate, then I think that's where a lot of value could come from. So,
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks. If you have questions, Abby, do you do any live streams on your own? Are you doing that kind of thing? No?
No, but I do post videos every week. So if
Okay.
you are on my channel, feel free to leave comments. I try to get back to people as frequently as possible. And then I stay pretty busy with my one-on-one client meetings. So if you are applying to a job or you're preparing for an interview, consider reaching out to me to assist you with the process, whether it's strategizing your job search approach or strategizing for your upcoming interview. But those 2 things keep me pretty busy. So
Yeah, and like for the people on my channel, like I don't provide one-on-one consultation for people looking to get jobs and stuff. So, if you're looking for a career coach, someone to do mock interviews with you, someone to give you like objective feedback, check out Abby's channel. She provides that service. She can do mock interviews with you. She can give you objective feedback about how you're doing, maybe some tips and recommendations of things to work on or to try and change that will be to your advantage, that will help you do better interviews. I know you do that. I know you do a lot of other services for people. So check out those, because I don't do any of that stuff on my channel. I have courses, but I don't do any consultations. So her channel, if you're watching this on my channel, a link to her channel is in the description box under this video, so you can follow that.
Yep. And if you're watching this on any of my channels, so Twitch or YouTube, Bill's info is also in the description of this live stream. And so if you want to check out, he's got some courses, and then he's got a lot of really helpful videos. I think that we're kind of like niche adjacent. So we don't do all of the content on the exact same things, but we have a lot of very similar content. And
we're coming at this from 2 different perspectives. Yes. There's some overlap, but there's also some interesting stuff, because you've done like a lot of like recruitment type work that I've never done, and I've been like sort of hiring manager doing networking type stuff that you don't usually talk about. So, there's a bit of overlap there, but I think people can get stuff from both of our respective channels and the content that we have.
And it goes back to tying from the very first thing we talked about. If you're going to get advice from someone, it's going to be completely different from what other people are going to say. So you will have the gamut of advice to pick from. And so engaging with both Bill's channel and my channel, you will be able to get a lot of advice that is similar and also some advice that is different. So you can pick what approach to take that resonates most with you.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks everyone. You guys are awesome. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.